everyone. Welcome to the Footy Interchange. Adam Papalia with you. Great to be back for episode 3. And this is the show where we crisscross the country. We head across the footy highway, across the footy interstate, and interchange between all of the different states and find out from the people that are on the ground what's actually happening in their states and around their teams as well. I know there's a lot of shows out there at the moment, a lot setting the agenda, a lot trying to get their headline, but we'll tell you exactly what's going on right around the country here on this program with the people that are in the know and actually living in the places where all of the stories and the latest is happening. We'll get right around the country, of course. We'll have a chat to Tommy Rockliff over there in Queensland, find out how the Storm has been faring and how the teams are going to go there. Cal Sinclair, the smartest backup ruckman that we know there in New South Wales. Of course, Drew Jones with some of the GOAT fantasy news out of Victoria and everything else happening over there in Melbourne. Simeon Thomas Wilson from the Adelaide Advertiser and Code Sports there in South Australia. We would normally be switching across to have a chat to Eliza Reilly from Code Sports here in WA, but I'm very pleased to say that we've upgraded from Will Schofield on today's podcast because he is out and about somewhere. We'll give you a bit more information on that shortly. But Eliza joins me as my co-host in the studio. Eliza, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Paps. It's quite fitting. I think I spent most of my amateur footy career on the Interchange, so good to be here on the Footy Interchange.
Great to have you here. And
excited to have Scully back next week.
Yeah, well, we're upgrading, I reckon, a little bit, Eliza, from Scully in terms of what's actually going on in this state and in footy news as well. One of the best journos in the business. We've got a lot to chat about today. We'll find out from Scully in a little bit what he's up to shortly, but opening round's been hot on the agenda. I think everybody's got a theory on what the best solution is and how we should actually open up the AFL season. What do you think?
I think that Mother Nature has told us that what we're doing currently does not work. And I still think there is a place to celebrate what's going on in New South Wales and Brisbane and Queensland, because they are such valuable states to the growth of the AFL and they have such powerful teams in those states. You know, 2 of them played off in the grand final last year. So I still think there's a place for that recognition of the New South Wales teams without completely ignoring the footy heartlands, which they're currently doing. So here's my solution. I've been workshopping it. I've been, drawing red tape on whiteboards, trying to figure out what to do. This is what I've settled on. Scrap opening round.
Yep.
I don't like just having 4 games. It feels anticlimactic. I'm a hardcore footy fan and last year when they first launched it, did not watch a single opening round game. My body was not conditioned to have football back. So what I would do is I would still have the 4 games in New South Wales and Queensland. I would have them on the big time slots. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, have one on Sunday night because we know there's a public holiday in those states the next day. Then I want 2 games in WA. I want Freo and West Coast both hosting games in WA. I want 2 games in South Australia. And on that public holiday Monday, I want a Victorian blockbuster. 2 of the biggest clubs going head to head. You got games in all the important states. You got the Vic fans happy because they get a big game down their way on that public holiday. That's where I would like to see it head.
I like it.
I'll send it to Laura Kane and Andrew Dillon.
Please flick it through. I'm completely with you on this, and we hadn't workshopped this before we actually chatted either, because
we're coming in cold.
We're coming in cold, but that's pretty much. I just think it makes sense to get it done, have footy in each state, and take it away from Victoria for that first round. Still have one big marquee game on that public holiday Monday. I'm not sure it's a public holiday in New South Wales.
We'll make
on that
it one.
weekend.
Yeah,
well, maybe
make
it one. WA has it's the week before, but there is one in South Australia, so you could play that Sunday night fixture perhaps in South Australia, heading into the public holiday the next day, and then as you said, if you want to promote the Queensland and New South Wales teams, play them on Thursday night, play them on Friday night, play them on Saturday night, and then fixture all the other games in around there well and truly. I think that is just the perfect way to go. 1 game in Victoria, blockbuster in Melbourne on the Monday. The way you could perhaps determine that is whichever Victorian club finishes the highest on the table from the year before gets the opportunity to open up the season and do that there in Victoria. So I think that just has a lot of validity. And then in round 2 or round 1, whichever you're going to call it, depending if we go with this opening round concept or not, then you go back to your traditional big Melbourne club fixtures on the Thursday night, on the Friday night, and build it up from there. I just think it makes sense.
Absolutely, and it's just, paying respect to the footy heartlands, where a lot of the fans are getting excited about the return of the season. It feels anticlimactic. It feels flat to be a WA footy fan and have no footy in the supposed opening round of the season. And it's a bit of a soft launch. It's like, oh, we're kind of playing, but we're kind of not.
Yep.
Like, it just feels that it needs more to it.
Yeah, and it overemphasised, obviously, with the 2 games this round rather than the 4 we were expected to have. So I think it's definitely got everybody talking. We'll chat to all of our guests today about what they want for opening round, and we'll hopefully, by the end of the show, get to the right solution as to what we actually want. Now, the other issue that's popped up, Eliza, over the weekend, and I put this on the agenda with Scully last week, is the AFL apparently sending out a memo to clubs about players being pushed into contests and getting injured. We've seen that happen a number of times through the pre-season. It first started with Ruben Jimby and Sam Lawler. We saw it, of course, with Brandon Starcevic, with Dan Curtin involved in that one. And then again on the weekend with Kieran Briggs getting injured. Now, some of these, I think, have been significant contact into a pack, but others not so much. And is it a footy action? Is it part of the game? Is it just a trend that's happening at the moment? The AFL allegedly sending a memo out to clubs saying they are going to crack down onto it. I feel at the moment, though, they've kind of been a little bit hamstrung as to where do you actually grade this as an incident?
Yeah, absolutely. And the saving grace for all these cases so far has actually been their eye line and where they're looking in terms of the play. That's been the reason players haven't been suspended. Because if you're looking at the ball, trying to read where it's come in and your hands are out of your eye line, then you can't make a case that the player was trying to do it intentionally. And we know that intentional is one of those big buzzwords in that matrix and is a big reason behind the suspensions being sort of upgraded to weeks. So I really don't know where they're going to take it. I don't really have an answer. I can't really help you in terms of that because I just don't see where it fits.
Yeah, it's is it body contact? It's not high contact, even though the contact is high eventually when the player collides with someone else, but it's not done by the infringing player. The AFL basically saying that it comes under a duty of care factor for the players, that if you've got your opponent and you're pushing them into a pack, that it's your duty of care to take a little bit more protection from them. I know Will Schofield is very fired up on this. I asked him about it last week, and he's not here with us today, but I wanted to just check in with him, Scoey, because I know that you are travelling. Can you confirm or deny if you're actually travelling at the moment to AFL House to make sure that they don't make this a suspendable offence?
Yeah, g'day Paps, can confirm, mate. I'm just flying out to AFL House. It's an absolute disgrace that we are still talking about this. What do you mean another incident? It's just players going for the footy in a contest. We're going to turn into a one-on-one game, no one going third man up, no intercept marks. Forwards can't go for the ball, backs can't go for the ball. Just remember, it's not just backs doing this is forwards. There is literally no way to legislate this. What's the memo saying? Players be careful of each other in the contest. Come on now, Paps. Mate, my flight's getting called. I'll let you know how I go with Dills. See Andrew Dillon and make sure this doesn't get across the line, mate. Hope all's well with the Footy Interchange. Here's my flight. Unbelievable.
Will Schofield, they're live from the airport there in Melbourne, Eliza. I'm not sure how he's going to go at AFL House. I know he always sticks up for the defenders. We'll keep you posted when he's back next week right here on the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange, and now we head to Victoria. We've joked, Elijah, over the last couple of weeks that Drew Jones is a bit of a WA plant in Melbourne. They've got him over there.
Get more over there.
Absolutely. I think he's having a bit of a crisis of where he actually lives in the country these days, because as we go to Drew Jones now, we think he's in Melbourne, but it looks like he's in Sydney. Drew, what's going on?
I'm just getting in the opening round spirit. Anywhere but Melbourne. Anywhere but... No, looks can be deceiving. It's just a studio background, but let's get in the spirit of the northern states.
Exactly. For those just listening in, there's a giant picture of the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House behind Drew Jones, who is actually updating us on what's going on in Victoria, Drew. And of course, I mean, the traditional season opener, when you say traditional, I guess for the last decade or so, if not longer, hasn't it been, that Carlton and Richmond is the game that opens up the season and everyone gets excited for it. How is it going this year, given the Blues are expected to do well? Richmond, not so much.
Yeah, I think the Blues got down to about $1.02 in terms of the betting stakes. There hasn't been a lot predicted in terms of it being a close contest. I think this is like the last bit of spag bowl that you've got from the big cook that you do. Let's just put it in a Tupperware container and put it in the freezer, and we can dig it out when we need it later. I just don't think it's going to be a good enough contest to have as our big round one blockbuster for the next few years. So let's just say, Richmond Carlton, thank you for your service on the Thursday night of round one. We can reheat it later because for me, it doesn't. I'm not excited about the game in terms of the contest. I'm excited for the MCG to be packed and for footy to be in Melbourne after a very soft launch. But it's Friday night that I'm interested in, Hawthorn against Essendon. And even then, it's not actually two, genuine top four fancies going, head to head. As good as it will be. I think the collective experience over the 2 nights of having a packed MCG is going to be great. I just think we can do better for that Thursday night fixture, to be honest.
I was at that corresponding game last season. It was actually a bloody good contest, but that was when Richmond had Daniel Reilly, Liam Baker, Jack Graham and a host of others. But yeah. I'm interested to talk a bit more about Carlton. What is actually the expectation and vibe around the Blues this year? Because I've seen some people predicting top 4 flags, lots predicting they'll miss the 8. Like, what's the read on them so far?
Yeah, I think the big question for me is maybe we get caught up in the Carlton hype a little bit. They haven't won a flag since '95. Michael Voss seems to have accumulated a lot of talent. But then they didn't go for the big fish during the off-season. They went to the draft and got Jagger Smith. Unfortunately, he's not going to be taking any part in the season. So just trying to read where their improvement comes from, where they can rise up the ladder after a pretty meek exit in the elimination final last year. They really fell into finals, losing to St Kilda in the last game of the season. So I've identified, can Sam Walsh have a career year after a great preseason until he did the hamstring? And then Adam Chera is the other one. After coming across from Fremantle, we just haven't seen the best of him with injury. But if Walsh and Chera can be, 1A and 1B alongside, one of the best players of the modern era in Patrick Cripps, who had a sensational year last year, perhaps if the engine room gets going with, a little bit of George Hewitt and some other contributions from around the team, maybe the Blues can find an extra gear with Walsh and Chera having a massive season. And I think that probably starts on Thursday night, dominating against Richmond, who are going to be clearly undermanned and really inexperienced.
Competition just has a bit of groundswell to it, I reckon, when the Blues are up and about, and Carlton fans are chirping about the place. What about some of the other teams out of Melbourne? Anyone in particular reckons really fascinating watch in round one?
I do, and it's the Western Bulldogs. I just don't know what to expect from the Dogs and from Luke Beveridge's team against North Melbourne. I'm actually going to tip North to win. I think the Dogs have had a shocking pre-season. Cody Waitman injured recently was a massive blow, and then to top it all off, Marcus Bontempelli going out with that calf injury. So it feels like they're of almost run aground this pre-season, and they're traditionally slow starters. I mean, think about how many times the Bulldogs have been like 3 and 5, and then they go on a run the second half of the year and make the finals. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that happened this year. I just can't see them coming out of the blocks and having a really fast start. I wouldn't be shocked if North, who seem like they've had a much better pre-season, and with Harry Sheezel ready to go to another level, and some experienced players and Luke Parker and Jack Darling on the books, I could see there being a shock, and then that just sets up the pressure on Luke Beveridge, who's out of contract at the end of the season. So that's the one I've got a big watch on, the Dogs ahead of round one, and a potential upset brewing there at Marvel on Saturday night.
All right, but before we talk some fantasy news with GOAT Fantasy, which I know you're very passionate about, opening round, what's the talk been on the ground there in Melbourne about how it should work best, and what do you think? I know now you've said that it shouldn't be Carlton and Richmond. What should it be?
Well, I think the Victorian perspective is clear from all the experts who have spoken about it the last few days. It's time to evolve and to do something a little bit different. So I've been pretty strong on this for people that I've spoken to in the last week or so. I think you could even think about trying to match the weekend that the NRL are in Vegas. But regardless, let's give the northern states the initial stuff. The AFL talk about these big event football, so they can have their Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, and then I reckon you give maybe Saturday during the day to Adelaide. You can play a double header with both the Crows and Port Adelaide at home. And then I think you have a big game at the MCG on Sunday, and I reckon you could even do a double header at Optus Stadium, start the day in Perth and finish it with a big game sort of Sunday evening. So everyone gets a little bite of the cherry, and then you have a proper Melbourne launch the next week where all the Melbourne teams play at home.
Seems to make sense, I reckon, Eliza. And if everyone's singing from the same book, then we might actually see it happen. Fantasy news, though. Goat Fantasy is the handle. People can go and check it out. Drew, how's it going? And what little tips have you got for us? What did you make of the first couple of games?
Yeah, so much to come out of it. I think we've got to lock in Finn Callaghan for the price rise. If you feel like you can carry him through the round 2 bye, great. But you're going to get like a 80 to 100k little bump in value from Finn Callaghan at the Giants, who was so good in round 1, and the same for Will Day. And then I could see Nick Dacos now dropping in price a lot after that 60 injury affected. So get Dacos into your plans after Collingwood's bye. And then the little flag is, so Tom Green a chance to play this weekend for the Giants, a bit earlier than expected off the calf injury. But it's the flow-on effect that has at the Giants. So someone like a James Leake, who was a popular defensive rookie, maybe he's off the table. But another one for you is Kieran Briggs. So he is out this week. I spoke to the Giants yesterday. They said that most likely Lockie Keefe is going to carry the ruck. Significant because they're playing against Melbourne. Max Gawn versus Lockie Keefe, who we all love Lockie Keefe, hard worker, trier. He's going to give his absolute all, but Max could have 60 hit outs, 30 disposals. Like, he could go absolutely nuts on Sunday at the MCG. We'll all be watching the Grand Prix, probably, while Max Gawn has an absolute party at the MCG. So maybe chuck the C on him if you've got him. Consider him alongside Tristan Cherry in your ruck line. But yeah, there's just so much. Keep coming back to Goat Fantasy this week. We'll have heaps of content for you.
Brilliant stuff, mate. You might be watching the Grand Prix, but you'll be having the fantasy scores just scrolling in the background as well. Absolute, mate. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Drew Jones there. You can check him out at Goat Fantasy on Fox Sports as well. What's the Victorian team, Eliza, you're looking forward to seeing the most of in round 1?
Looking forward most to seeing or most intrigued about?
Most intrigued by.
Most intrigued. I'd have to say the Western Bulldogs as well. It's just so interesting what's gone on at that club over the off-season, and it almost feels like Luke Beveridge might be coaching with one hand behind his back early on in the year. And what does that do for his contract talks? What does that do for the potential of Jamara Ugle-Hagan and where his future sits at the club? There's so many different scenarios and so many different stories to come out of that club. And I completely agree with Drew. I could very much see North Melbourne getting a win on the board against them early on.
Haven't had many wins right through the last few years, have they, the Kangaroos? They'd love to get off to a good start. And we'll wait and watch that with interest. Drew Jones there with all of the latest out of Victoria. The Footy Interchange, let's head across to Queensland now, because it's been really the talk of the country, and even further afield than that, with everyone keeping their eyes on exactly how bad that storm was going to be. We had a couple of games cancelled last week, and our man in Queensland, of course, is Tommy Rockliff, 200 gamer in the AFL. Rockliff Finance for all your finance needs, of course, as well. Tommy, first questions first. How are you going? How'd the house hold up, and how is everyone over there in Queensland after some pretty wild weather?
Yes, Queensland, the Sunshine State. So we're back to sunshine now, which is nice. So yeah, it was pretty hairy there for a little bit. Overall, pretty good. I lost a bit of power for about 56 hours in the end, so it was a bit of a struggle. But when you're home alone, it's quite manageable. And yeah, a fair bit of rain in a short period of time. Unfortunately, depends which way you look at it. Kept getting pushed back, and so it didn't really feel the effects until Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So we probably could have got those games away in the end, but yeah, we'll take a little halt on them and get to them later in the year. But overall, I think I was safe, and I think a lot of people around here, a little bit of flash flooding certainly hit worse down the Gold Coast and northern New South Wales. So thoughts with them, and as always happens, we come together as communities and fight through these periods and look after each other. So yeah, away we go.
Speaking of the Lions, they're obviously heading down to Sydney a bit earlier than they normally would, just to get out of the conditions and hopefully get in a good training run before their game on the weekend.
Yeah, they certainly are. So they went out to Springfield yesterday, which is out in the western suburbs, pretty wet out there. Still had an indoor session, which they normally have on a Monday for a Saturday night game. Trained at the Gabba today, so that ground, as we've seen in the past, you can have 400 mils, and within an hour it's pretty dry. So the drainage on that's really good. They were able to get a training session away there. I led to believe they'll fly down to Sydney tomorrow and build from there, but that may have changed as well. If they can continue to get training sessions away here, they may rejig those plans, but certainly the plans yesterday were to get down there Wednesday, give themselves the best prep they can heading towards Sydney, and they'll be cherry ripe. Obviously, it's a bit of an interrupted last week and a half for them, but Sydney ripe for the taking, I would have thought.
Do you think it'll have much of an effect, Tommy? Like that interrupted training on players? Like we know AFL players are so used to just being so regimented with their sessions and what they're doing, and when you can't get to the club for a week, you think you're supposed to be playing a game. Like, is it going to have an impact?
Potentially. They might start a little bit sluggish, but I think once the ball's bouncing 5-10 minutes in, you get going. I think COVID proved that we're quite flexible once we have to be. You have to just to adjust to certain situations. We're managed to every minute of every day, and for some that can be hard to adjust to, but I think they'll be okay.
And then the Gold Coast Suns have taken the other route to it, I guess, in that they're not travelling to Perth early. They're coming right across the country, so they feel like they can get their best preparation still at home. Yeah,
well, the rain's all stopped now, and as I said before, the drainage on these grounds are pretty good these days, so they'll be able to get most of their training sessions in. They don't play till Sunday afternoon, but a game like this is, if they want to play finals footy and take that next step, they just have to go over West this weekend and just get West Coast done, don't they? I mean, everyone speaks about the Gold Coast potentially being knocking on the door of finals. I think they'll improve. I'm not sure whether they'll get there or not, but they're going to have to win games like this on the road. They're pretty irresistible at home. They're hard to beat on their home deck, but as we found out last year, winning on the road was a massive challenge for them, and no better way to start the season now for them after getting postponed last week against Essendon to go on the road against what we all think is probably a rebuilding team, a bottom four team against West Coast. You've just got to win these games of footy.
Brilliant stuff, mate. Great to hear that you're going okay, that most people have survived most of the damage that's been done over there, and everything's getting back to normal. A bit of sunshine there in Queensland, mate. Thanks very much.
No worries. Not opening round. We're not touching.
Oh, that's true. Sorry. You're keeping me onto it here. You may as well host a show from over there as well. What do you reckon? Because it is built up for the Queensland and New South Wales, for the states up there. So clearly you've got a theory on what should be working here because you want to get it out.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I understand the concept. I think we should have 9 games. Everyone wants to see their team play on the opening round. I would have the build-up to the first game of the season, a grand final replay. Imagine the Sydney Swans having to come up to the Gabba, watch on a Thursday night, watch Brisbane unveil their flag after they had their pants pulled down in the grand final. The emotions would be through the roof for both teams, and it would be just on. I think it would be a great build-up. I think we need to play 9 games, but I would have the opening game as that. Sydney have had all summer to reflect on what went wrong on grand final day. They have to stand there, be put through Brisbane unveiling the flag, bringing the Premiership Cup out. Cherry ripe round 1 opening game. I think that's what it should be moving forward.
It's a brutal thing to have to sit through. But
You're a sociopath.
Those first few minutes would be red hot, though, I reckon.
Absolutely. I think it'd be just on. What better way to start the season for both clubs? Brisbane coming out to defend it. Sydney want redemption. It'd be on for the first 5 or 10 minutes.
Love it. Great stuff, mate. Thanks very much.
All the best.
Tommy Rockliff there in Queensland. What do you reckon about that, Eliza? Opening round, starting it with the grand final rematch.
I don't mind it. It's a very good way. We like to move forward in the AFL, but we also love our rivalries and to hedge on the past and to look at what happened last season. And, that was literally the last game last season. So it's a little cruel, I think, for Tom to suggest that the Swans get rolled out and have to watch the whole ceremony.
It's almost like flashbacks to, was it the Crows playing the Richmond theme song on the bus?
Exactly.
For the whole pre-season.
Yeah.
Well, not the whole pre-season, but part of the
Power
pre-season.
stance ain't going to help you in that situation.
And then just making them sit there and watch the flag be unfurled, thinking of what you could have done the year before.
Yeah.
It's it could be a tough way to start, but I reckon that first 10 minutes would be red hot, cracking. Another theory we've got on how to solve this problem that we've got called opening round here on the Footy Interchange. Well, a break back in here on the Footy Interchange because straight after we went off air recording the Footy Interchange, there was some breaking news coming through from the Brisbane Lions that Lincoln McCarthy unfortunately has suffered another significant injury. I recruit back in Tommy Rockliff up there in Queensland just to get the first reaction and a feel for just how devastating this is for the Lions star.
Yeah, so obviously heartbreaking news there for Link McCarthy as well, who's just been confirmed, done his ACL again, and will miss the full season again. I mean, certainly loved at the club, and he's had his fair share of injury setbacks throughout his career, and he's fought through them, had a really, really good run at the Lions, obviously up until about round 7 or 8 last year. I think he may have even been leading the best and fairest at that point when he went down, and to miss a whole season again, he'll be devastated, and so will the club. Horrible news, and wish Link all the best, and just horrific on the eve of the season.
The Footy Interchange, let's head to New South Wales with Cal Sinclair, our intrepid reporter on the ground over there. Fresh off Cal, gather round New South Wales where we had the first couple of matches across the weekend. Different fortunes for the two clubs there in Sydney and the Giants, but just wanted to kick things off. Just a little bit of a verbal stoush going on the boundary line. What did you make of that? It's made headlines over the last couple of days with Craig McRae and Adam Kingsley.
I absolutely loved it, to be brutally honest. I think that's one thing that we're not seeing enough in the game is a lot more theatrics and emotion from, back to the old days. But I think the most disappointing person in that whole saga definitely would have been the Port Adelaide coach, Ken Hinkley, being fined $20,000 for his antics last year with Jack Ginnivan against the Hawks. But look, it's harmless. I think it's great to see both clubs, both coaches show a bit of emotion, fire their teams up. And look, at the end of the day, it's a great spectacle. It gets people talking. You and I are having a chat about it now, so it's obviously worked. But I thought it was a bit of an overreaction from everyone, and I thought it was great.
GWS, they were scintillating against the Magpies. Their speed, their midfield, everything seemed to be clicking. What did you make of their first up performance?
Mate, they were absolutely brilliant. I was completely blown away with just their complete running power. And I think I may have said this a couple of weeks ago, guys. They probably, along with the Swans, but not on the weekend, they play the best and most exciting brand of football. I think it was purely evident. I think Nick Dacos came off with a cramp kind of halfway through the third quarter, which was, uncharacteristic of him. But it just shows the running power, and I guess probably the preparation of the Giants and how, excellent they've been in all over summer. But it just feels like the Giants have got so much more growth in their game. But I'll tell you what, if they play like that against a pretty good Collingwood outfit, they're going to be hard to beat.
And they're missing a few players too, and didn't have Jesse Hogan out there, Tom Green, of course, but no Green in the midfield, which means that Finn Callahan was able to step up, and obviously the Saints are disappointed they couldn't get his signature with a performance like that first up.
Yeah, well, I'll probably eat my words. I was pretty critical of his $17 million contract offer a couple of weeks ago. But don't get me wrong, he's a good player, but $17 million is a great deal of money. But if he continues to, have an impact like he did on the weekend, I'm sure a big payday, if he's not already on one, is definitely around the corner. But I think Jake Stringer is a notable absentee from that team as well. So fair bit of growth in that game.
What about Sydney? There's been a lot of talk about McCartan and where his best fit in the team is. Obviously went forward on the weekend. What's your personal read?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I don't think they've probably got the blend of the forward mix quite right just yet. I know we're only at the very start of the season, so we all can't get too carried away. I think Tom naturally played as a forward, so it's not unfamiliar to him. But I just think he's been such a strong defender for the group. I think he's just, been the pillar of that full back line over the last few years. So it's a big decision to take him out of it. I'd probably prefer to see him, start as a defender and then play that kind of James Sicily type of role, go forward when you need to and have an impact. But look, he competed really well. He didn't get the supply that probably forwards like at the moment, but Hawthorn were just far too good.
Are you panicking on the Swans yet after one game? How critically should we be looking at this first one? I know Dean Cox said he felt like they got a couple of things wrong that they could adjust for next time, but they just looked, they looked a little bit flat in that first game.
Not to take anything away from Hawthorn, but they looked big. They looked very powerful. I don't know what they've done over the summer, but they looked like a strong they're not kids anymore. They're seasoned, hardened AFL footballers. But no, not getting too carried away with the Swans. I think the reality is they still haven't got their best team out on the park, which is not an excuse. But I think Callum Mills probably needs to get back in there. He's got a foot injury. Errol Goulden, we know what's going on with that ankle. But I must say, they probably would have wanted to put in a better performance than what they did. They probably, on paper, look to be a better team than Hawthorn, but I think Hawthorn made a real statement to the competition.
That they did. Scully already has them as premiership favourites, I think. He was joking after that first game. And Cal, before we let you go, opening round, what do you like about it? Do you want to keep it just in the northern states up there, or have you got another solution for us?
Oh, look, it's a tough one. I think, when you've got the NRL playing in Vegas, for anyone that lives up here, that just got absolutely smashed in the media. Everyone was all about it. I follow the NRL, but I'm closely aligned with the AFL for obvious reasons. I couldn't help but get involved. It's going to be very, very difficult to compete. But look, I don't know about the future of it. I just think the more footy played in round one, the better. People get excited. You've got a big part of the population down in Victoria that don't get that exposure for the excitement of kind of round one, if that kind of makes sense. But I think next year it might look a bit different because there's a lot of negative commentary this year.
Yeah, get some more games played. Cal, thanks so much, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Cal Sinclair there. You can check him out on ABC Radio covering plenty of matches as well. Eliza, are you panicking about Sydney yet? Obviously, with only 2 games, there's a lot of criticism that comes for the 2 teams that lost, Collingwood, but also Sydney going back to that match against Hawthorn. They certainly missed Goulden.
Yeah, they did. I think we've learnt about the Swans in grand finals, but also in season, when their best top 5 players aren't playing well or they're not playing, they do struggle, and Goulden is one of those. And I think Chad Warner obviously did a lot of heavy lifting through that midfield on the weekend and stood up, but I'm not ringing the alarm bells just yet. I think obviously first game at the helm for Dean Cox, he would have learnt a hell of a lot out of that, and I think we can look back to a moment like, I think it was Will Hayward kicking straight across goal and causing a turnover, which led to Hawthorn getting the advantage in that third quarter again. So I think there's a lot to be improved for Sydney. We know they were the best side last year for a lot of the season, and it's probably not a bad thing for them to get that reality check straight up against a team like Hawthorn, who expect to be top 4 competitors. I don't think it's doomsday yet at all.
There's a few of those turnovers late, wasn't there? And then the rain came down, and then the goal coughed up. Florent was another one that did one and kicked it back across goals, and I think that's when they
Florent was
the
one I was thinking of.
Yeah, and then for me, I think missing Logan McDonald's a big issue for Sydney with their forward line, and just having a little bit more oomph and firepower to kick goals. The McCartan experiment, I think, can work, as Cal sort of said, but if McDonald's back there, it just gives them much greater flexibility.
Straightens them up a lot more.
Yeah, certainly, but he's still a little while away, I believe. You're listening to the Footy Interchange. You're listening to the Footy Interchange. Adam Papalia, Eliza Reilly with you. Eliza, let's head across now to South Australia, of course, because Simeon Thomas Wilson is from the Adelaide Advertiser and from Code Sports, and he joins us now. He's just about to head into a press conference, so we've just caught him in time, thankfully. Mate, great to have a chat to you. Of course, let's start with the Crows. A lot of people predicting them to go well this season. You got a big match up against the Saints, but probably a pretty good opportunity given the Saints have been hit by a bit of injury.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me. Yeah, this is plain and simple. I think this is a game the Crows have to win if they want to make finals. If they want to actually, live up to the expectations, they have to win this game. St Kilda were poor in the pre-season. Adelaide have been good this pre-season. They're playing Adelaide Oval. St Kilda, they're missing a few players. Crows have to win this game. They lost to Gold Coast last year, and that put them behind the 8 ball. They have to win this game. Plain and simple, it's a must-win game for them almost in round 1.
Sim, Port have Collingwood at the MCG. It's the Prison Bar Cup. Dan Houston obviously taking on his former side. What can you tell us about how this game's going to unfold?
Well, normally Collingwood have Port's edge at the MCG. The last 2 times there, they've really thumped them. And even though Port are missing Zach Butters, Brandon Zerth-Thatcher, Todd Marshall, Stava Radaglia probably won't play. But, this might be a good chance for them to actually take on Collingwood. Collingwood looked quite slow against GWS, and Port Adelaide's pre-season summer is all about being playing fast. Now with this new forward line, they might actually be able to cause Collingwood a bit of troubles if they can clamp down Nick Dacos with Willem Drew.
Sim, the Power, obviously, Dan Houston leaving in the off-season. Of course, he had that big suspension. He's now at the Pies. Funnily enough, the AFL have scheduled this game for round 2 just as a suspension ends. So what's that reception going to be like?
I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think Porter kind of like a little bit like, hang on, what's going on here with the scheduling? It's also when you have the game against Hawthorn in Gabba round. But I think there's still a lot of love for Dan Houston at Alberton from of the players and the coaches. I know he was a very popular member. He was part of the leadership group. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes. Also, interesting to see how Joe Richards goes, a guy who came over from Collingwood, former teacher's aide, a mature age player. The Power already love him. They absolutely can't get enough of him. Like, they talk him up all the time. The players love him. The coaches love him. I think Chad Corn said that we haven't had a player like him for a while as a small forward. So he could be, I know he's the one that's blown under the radar for all his career, but he actually might be a nice way of the Power compensating for losing Houston.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting watch with those new recruits at the Power. Just before we let you go, Connor Rozee, any update on that toe injury for him? And obviously the tackle from Horn Francis in the practice match copped a little bit of criticism as well.
Yeah. Connor Rozee said he's fine. He had scans on Saturday and they cleared him of everything, so cleared of any damage, so he should be fine. Yeah, it was an interesting one. I actually filmed it on my vid. I was filming it on just on my phone and kind of went back to it, and he looked like Horn Francis just wanted to, leave a bit of a tackle on him for a little after they had a little bit of a tackle or a little bit of an incident before because they were playing on each other. So that one was kind of interesting. I just saw Taylor Walker on his usual spot here had a big go at David King for having a go at it, really. So saying he was out of touch with the modern game. So it was a bit of an interesting one. Not something you really see in internal trials too much.
No, not too much at all, mate. We'll let you go. I know you got to get to the press conference. Thanks very much.
No, thanks so much, guys.
Simeon Thomas Wilson there in South Australia. Eliza, what's your early read on the Crows and Port this season?
Well, for the Crows, it's a do-or-die season, isn't it? Matthew Nicks is yet to take them to finals in sort of 5 years now, his tenure, and heading into his 6th season. It's just, with the list they have, they got close, obviously, a couple of years ago before that umpire howler against the Swans cost them that spot in finals, but it feels like it's sort of now or never. They need to take the next step. They've got one of the best forward lines on balance in the competition with some young stars mixed with someone like Taylor Walker, who's still showing no signs of slowing down. So I just think that it's over to the Crows to stand up and make a mark on the competition this season.
Yeah, they're one of those teams I think can go a long way up the table. And as we mentioned, it's pretty funny. It doesn't happen by luck, is it? It's by design. Dan Houston playing against the Pies, playing against his old side, playing now for the Pies this week. And for Port Adelaide, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on them too. Going close last year, people expecting them to do well, the coaching handover. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on how they go early in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. That coaching handover, I think, is going to be one of the biggest stories in the competition this year, because we've seen so many failed attempts and so many attempts where the person who's coming into the role maybe, tries to put their own spin on things a bit too early and sort of not undermine completely, but have an influence on what the senior coach is doing, which when you're the senior coach, you want to have that control for what will be Ken's final year at the helm, and whether it has an impact on the players as well. They obviously love Ken and want to play for him, but it just seems like they've got one eye to the future, which how often do AFL clubs say we take it 1 week at a time?
Yeah, exactly. Now they're looking years into the future, aren't they? That's all the latest there out of South Australia here on the Footy Interchange. Well, with Scully on his way over to AFL House, I'm very excited to have Eliza here in the studio. Eliza, where we can actually talk some of the WA footy news that's going on at the moment in person. Let's start with Freo. All eyes on them. They'll be playing on Saturday, travelling over to the Cats, a place where they've actually played okay over the journey and got a few good results there. But they've had some injury niggles, not long-term stuff for a lot of their players, but how they're looking for their round one availability.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a bit nervous if I'm Justin Longmire, because you look at their injury list at the moment. We know no Sean Darcy, he's still a few weeks away. They've ruled Hayden Young out with that hamstring. Walters is in a bit of doubt now after having a bit of knee soreness. The knee he had operated on over the Christmas break. Nat Fyfe's coming off a very limited pre-season. We've barely seen him sort of in the main group since he had that knee surgery, while he has started to pick it up again now. Shea Bolton, there was news around last night that he might be in a bit of doubt with sort of a bit of a shin niggle, which I think the fear with something like that is it could develop into shin splints, which I've never had them, but apparently they're bloody painful. So you don't want to be dealing with that for a whole season, let alone in round one. And then Josh Draper as well has got a hamstring injury. So that's a lot of players who would be thereabouts for Fremantle's best 22 who are unavailable or going to be pushing it, like racing the clock to be there in round one.
It's a massive game for Freo. I mean, if they could get a result over there in Geelong, it just seems to set them off on that trajectory to try to push towards a final spot. I believe they've been training quite early in the morning this week and the last couple of weeks just to try to get acclimatised, because it's an early game time start. So it's about 10:30, I think, WA time that the game will actually start. So they've travelled over there with daylight savings with a 3-hour difference. That'll be a little bit of a different thing that they have to get used to.
Yeah, like we know that early on in the season it is something our WA sides have had to cop for the past few years, but you think back to that 2022 game when they went over there and won in that absolute thriller. I think that was about 11:30 start, so still an hour difference, but that was definitely, from memory, a morning game. So they've proven they've been able to do it before, but if I'm half asleep as a journalist trying to cover the game off the TV, I don't know how those boys get up and play.
No, ready to go. It's amazing, like going over there. 2 hours feels not too bad. As soon as it goes to 3 hours with daylight saving, when you're going across the other side of the country, it just feels like a much bigger deal.
I
for
feel
some reason.
jet lagged, and I hate admitting that to people, but
I
I'm like, I would rather go to Europe and have like a fucking 8-hour time difference than a 3-hour in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, just throws your body clock out completely. So that's what Freo are dealing with this week. Across to West Coast, their availability for this round, and we're going to see any debutants yet, do we know?
Yeah, the big news this morning is that Beau Allen, who's obviously the first round draft pick from the draft just gone, really been impressive in that sort of back line for West Coast this pre-season. He's been dealing with a bit of illness, so he's in a bit of doubt to play this weekend, but the good news is he was training this morning. There is that main session on Thursday as well that he'll likely have to get to put his hand up, but the Eagles are aware that he is a young player. There's no rush with someone like Beau Allen, as much as the fans would love to see him out there in round one. If he's sick, if he's crook, if he's not up to it, they're not going to risk him. So he touch and go. The only other big ones really are Elliot Yeo, who he knows a few weeks away. Liam Ryan's been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring niggle, and there's a few other guys I think that are raring to go really. I think it's a pretty healthy West Coast injury list, to be honest, from what we've seen in the past few years from this club.
I think the ruck is going to be interesting what West Coast do there. Matt Flynn looked like through the preseason they want to play him as the first choice and predominantly the ruck. And then do they go with Bailey Williams? Do they go with Archer Reid? And then Oscar Allen is the other one in terms of his availability. He missed that last preseason game because of a wedding, so we expect that he'll be right to go. But his name's been talked about a lot this week, about his contract, about other clubs coming to circle for him too. What's your read on the situation with Oscar Allen? Because it seems West Coast want to wait to see how his knee's going to go before they offer him a deal. For me, he's your captain. He's 26 years of age. It just seems like one that you don't want lingering for the whole year.
Yeah, I mean, first it was Brisbane, and now over the weekend it's been reported that Hawthorn have now entered the race to secure his services, and exactly that. He's your co-captain of the club. He said on a club podcast once that he'd only ever play for West Coast and West Perth, which is obviously the club he came from, so he doesn't want to leave West Coast. It's not like his head's being turned because of success at other clubs. Like, it's not one of those free agency things where you go and chase a premiership after you've done a few years at your first club. He wants to stay at the Eagles. He wants to be a part of this rebuild, but the longer they don't come to the party in terms of the contract length, which is the main haggling point. He wants a long-term deal. West Coast, like you said, want to wait and see what happens with his knee. The longer they're at a stalemate, the more opportunity there is for these opposition clubs to come in and say, hey, this is what we can offer you, this is what we can put on the table, and it gives Oscar the opportunity to heavily consider that and his future.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting watch, absolutely. Eliza, great job today. Scully might be out of a job next week, but thank you so much. How'd you find it?
Yeah, it was good fun. I think Scully's going to come back absolutely banging the door down after his trip to AFL House. I dare say he's going to try and get Laura Kane or Andrew Dillon on speed dial for you guys next week. So we'll leave it with him.
Great job today. Thank you so much. Eliza Reilly there. You can check out all of her stuff on Code Sports, of course. I've got plenty of footy this weekend. Really looking forward to getting stuck into round one. 6 PR on Thursday night. I'll be calling the game with Scully on Friday night as well if you want to tune there on 6pr.com.au or via the app. And then, of course, in action alongside Scully and a few others, Matthew Pavlich, Adam Simpson and Kath Lockton for West Coast and the Gold Coast with Fox Footy on Sunday. So all of that ahead across the weekend. We'll be back next Tuesday with the Footy Interchange. Thanks very much.